We have a motto here that goes, energy creates emotions and emotions create enrollments. Every day we bring in this energy. Energy is key. When our agents are smiling, they're smiling through the phone and the customers receive that same energy.
Our job isn't necessarily to make a sale to a client. It's to help them find the whys. Why did you buy your Medicare supplement policy? Why did you buy your Medicare Advantage policy? Why did you buy that hospital indemnity or that life policy?
The win is the journey. The fun part is the journey. It's not the destination. Once we get into the application, great, but it's like we won that customer over. We know that it's not going to be a chargeback. This is going to stick. You're going to have a higher stick rate, being that you spent more time on the phone with the customer.
Hey guys, Curt Graham here again with Inside EIP. Today's a little bit different than a lot of the other conversations we've had in the past. A lot of our focus has been on Medicare, but today I've got somebody from our life team. I've got Wiley here. He joined the life team right when it was starting to build an EIP. If you know, we've been in the Medicare business for over 11 years now. Actually just had our 11-year anniversary, I think sometime last month. And about a year and a half ago, we opened up and started a life team. We've always done a little bit of life here and there, but really made it a focus about a year and a half. And Wiley, you were a part of that, joining. I think at first it was only just like 2 or 3 agents. And I mean, we had 50 plus agents on the Medicare side of things. And then it was like, hey, let's try out the life side. And then as we hired on our first actual life class, I think that's when you joined the life side of the business. Is that right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So it started originally with like 5 agents, like you said. And then eventually, we moved the focus into getting a full team on board with life, where I was fortunate enough to be part of that first full team, from day one, from when they came in to nesting, rolling out of nesting, getting onto the floor, actually making deals and things like that. So I've been there from beginning to where they're currently at right now. And I mean, they're just progressing every day. It's always better. So, yeah.
So for those other Medicare shops out there, I know I've been a part of this. I've been on groups and I've put out a couple of videos on some comp changes that have happened, especially on the Medicare Advantage side of things. There's a whole big mix up in the market. And I think that's kind of what actually got Jagger to look at starting up our life division. It was that final rule 2025 actually came out at the end of 2024. Major changes were going to be coming to the Medicare Advantage market. And it was like, hey, what are some other things that we can do to diversify? We've got this Medicare thing figured out. We've been doing it for years. We know how to sell Medicare supplements. We've learned how to sell Medicare Advantage and we perfected that. We've got both sides of the Medicare business lined up. We are strong on ancillaries. On the attach rate. Wiley, I'm sure you can speak to that as you were originally a part of the Medicare team, right?
Correct. When I joined EIP, I started as a Medicare agent. Actually, I started when they rolled out the the technology piece of it, right? The scripting. We incorporated a sales training, a new sales training. So I was kind of like part of that development when things were being rolled out. So yeah, I started as a Medicare agent. I did it for, pretty much about a year. And with selling those Medicare policies, we would attach ancillaries, right? Critical illness plans, cancer, heart attack, stroke, accident, things like that. It just gave us more opportunity, more buckets to make more money. And it made more sense, especially because, they tie in hand. Those policies with the ancillaries tie hand in hand. So obviously we didn't want to leave any stone unturned. And so we took advantage of that. And not to jump too far ahead, but ideally we replicated that here into life. And that's why I think we've been pretty successful.
We've introduced the ancillary side of the business, but ancillaries, when we're talking about it inside EIP, and this may be the same, I think it probably is for most other agencies out there. When we think of ancillaries, it's those dental, vision, hearing plans, DVHs, standalone dental, standalone vision. Also, hospital indemnity, as you mentioned, accident, cancer, heart attack, and stroke. Not really life. I feel like that's almost its own separate category, because a life policy, yes, should be a part of every agent's overall conversation when they're talking Medicare, especially those, agents that are sitting down across the table from somebody. If you're not doing a full review, you're missing out. You've got to be doing that. But the ancillary products that line up really well with, for instance, a Medicare Advantage plan might be a hospital indemnity policy, or an additional dental policy, because a lot of the plans have some dental built into them, but it's not comprehensive. And so when we were talking ancillary on the Medicare side, it was those types of policies. And the life was every now and then we'd had some life sales. And then when the life division was born, that's when we really kind of perfected the life sale, right?
Exactly. I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because that's exactly right. So with Medicare, that was dental, vision, hearing, if you wanted like additional benefits, or a hospital indemnity plan, right, to pick up the days of the cost that the Medicare Advantage plan did not, right, for the first 5 days, 4 days, 6 days, whatever the plan was. But now with life, it's a little different. Now, instead of talking about dental, vision, hearing, and hospital indemnity, right, we talk more about the critical illness plans, the cancer, heart attack, and stroke plans, the accident plans, right? There are a few boxes that we have to check out, before we propose those ancillaries. To give you an example, if a customer is on Medicaid, right, you don't want to propose them a accident plan, because if in the event they file a claim and they receive that lump sum, that could take them out of their income bracket, which then they could lose their Medicaid benefits. So there are a few things that you kind of want to be careful when you pitch. But again, these are things that we have an outline and boxes that we'd like to check off before we pitch it. It has to make sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you don't want to put your client in a worse place than they were in before they talked to you.
Right, of course.
Sure, an accident policy might work, but in all reality, if somebody's on Medicaid,
Right.
they really don't have much in their budget to be buying some of these ancillary policies. A lot, sometimes there is that room for the final expense side of things. But in terms of some of the, additional policies, it's really not a fit for them. And then putting them in a place where they could potentially lose it. I've had that happen with clients in the past, where they get a lump sum of money for whatever reason. And sometimes it gets them kicked off, and in a way that maybe they shouldn't have got kicked off. Where it was a qualified transfer that they were able to get, but it still takes time, right? Medicaid gets cut, plans have to change. They need a new, Medicare Advantage plan, and then we're playing this whole back and forth game for the next couple months. Now let's go over to the life side. Like you said, we started off, and I think this is kind of important for anybody out there, any agency out there that is looking at a lot of the changes that we're seeing in Medicare. Between some increases in premiums on the Medicare supplement side that maybe are a little scary to some people. It's really not a Chicken Little, the world is coming crashing down situation. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to change. It's an opportunity to improve. And I think that's really what we've done well at EIP, is looked at the opportunity and said, hey, where can we diversify? And that's where the life side of the business comes in. And so what EIP did is we started off with some of our agents that were on the Medicare side. We didn't just hire brand new agents out of the gate. Took some of our guys that, and gals that knew how to sell, and did a little proof of concept. Put 4 or 5 of them over there, started on the leads, make sure that they can sell the policy, perfected our script and everything. And that's when we decided, okay, this is time for us to jump in to that part of the business and hire on a full class. And that's when you joined the life team, right?
Correct. Absolutely. I think one of the biggest benefits was, like I said, when Medicare rolled out the technology piece, and when I mean technology piece, we implemented a lot of things. For instance, like the scripting. We implemented a new sales training, which really helped the agent work on like tone, work on pace, work on things that really mattered when you're on the other line of the call or of the deal. I think that helped me as well when I transitioned into life, because I knew what that was in Medicare. And since we were following the same process, it was like a blanket process. We applied it to life, and we've gotten successful. We've become successful because of that same exact process. So essentially, it's almost like same process, different product. With a couple different tweaks here and there. And so that's what I really think, or why I really feel that we've excelled as a life department. I think, we've excelled more than anticipated or projected, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, everything I hear of the life division's absolutely crushing it. I see some of the reports coming out, and we are hitting those projections and
We are.
and blowing through those records
Yep.
on a weekly and daily basis. So it's been a great success for us. And I think you like kind of touched on a really important piece of that, which is not completely reinventing the wheel. We had a proven system on the Medicare side, and Wiley's talking about we rolled out scripting. He's talking about more of our on-screen scripting. Not that we didn't have any scripts before, but making it to where it's a lot easier for our agents to be able to follow and stay where they are, as opposed to, there's a lot of groups out there. I know them. I talk to them still to this day that have a nice paper script that their agents follow about 5% of the time. And it's the first 5% of the script, and then it's off to the races. So we kind of standardized. We were able to standardize that script, so every call is very similar. We're big on making sure that we're following along with those. And so then when it came time for us to grow the life division and turn that into a new successful arm of the business, it wasn't a brand new situation for us. And so really utilizing things that we did well, and then just transitioning that over to a life script. And that was a big part of it. Also, like you mentioned, on the training aspect of everything, that was huge. Now, did you join the life team as a supervisor as you are now? Or were you originally just an agent on the team? I don't need to be just an agent.
Good question. So when I was in Medicare, I was actually a team lead. So I was on track to be a supervisor for the next Medicare class. I spoke to, my higher ups. We had a conversation and said, hey, listen, there's actually a life class that's starting before the Medicare class. We feel that you would be a good fit, especially because, I'm pretty good with following processes, and also, energy, which I'm sure we'll touch on here in a little bit. But so all those things, they felt that I was a good fit. And so that's why when Nesting came on board with the new life class, they put me in their life class with them. So I was part of their Life 101. I was part of like the education piece of learning the product. I was there with them in the trenches and learning the product, and I presented myself as their supervisor as well, letting them know, hey, we're all learning together, and the idea is to grow together. They built they trusted me because of the longevity that I've been here, because of my past, being that I've been in sales for so long. And so like that confidence in me was already established in Nesting. So once we got out on the floor and I started doing whispers with them and I'm helping them close deals, right, that just built even a better confidence level. And so, I just feel that, kind of transitioning into life and having, sticking to the process of what EIP, teaches you, and, bringing the energy, right? I think these are all things that attribute to our success.
So when you're talking about nesting, maybe that might be a term that other people know. I think it is kind of an industry term, but that's our training portion as a new class comes on. Now, being that you were, before you were at the EIP, you were part of the ACA and that whole fun times that we all had back then in the early teens.
Yeah.
And then, what that's turned into today. You've had the sales experience. Well, tell me a little bit about, just your opinion on what's the difference in the sale between a Medicare sale and a life sale. Just overall kind of a top level view.
So very high level. The difference in between the life and the Medicare is with Medicare, there's a sense of urgency. You have enrollment periods, Medicare Advantage plans that change annually. So customers are looking for new plans. Really just to put it in a nutshell, is that there's urgency in Medicare, but there's not urgency in life. You have to build that sense of urgency with a life customer versus a Medicare customer. So a lot of times Medicare customers, they have to do something. Most of the time, life insurance customers, they just are just inquiring, or they want to do something, but they're not too sure if this is the right move for them or not, right? There's no obligation there for the life customer. So again, very high level, I would say the best way to answer that would be that there's urgency in Medicare, where with life, there is no urgency. It's more of an emotional sale. It really depends on the agent on really drawing that emotional value from the customer, right? So they can tie that back into the close. And that's really how, we get most of our customers on board. Oh yeah, of course you have your low hanging fruit. They call in, hey, I want a life insurance policy. Mine's is too expensive. I want to see if I can find something that's more cost effective, same benefit amount, maybe a little more benefit amount, things like that. But the majority of our customers are those that are just inquiring. They just want to get quotes. There's no necessity. There's no obligation for them to have it, right? And those are the ones that we kind of focus on.
Let's be honest. Most of the people that call in, they're not the person that goes, I want a new policy and I'm ready to buy. I already know why I want to buy. I would say even those people don't necessarily have that urgency built in. And there's still a barrier there, right? Even if you've got a life insurance policy and I can save you 15, 20, 30 or 40 bucks a month, I still got to go through medical underwriting. I still got to get that stuff taken care of. And that's not always easy. And so I think one of the things that is also true on the life side, as it is on the Medicare side, is we always educate, right?
Right.
That is a part of the process. It's not you've got a policy with, XYZ company and you're paying $86 a month. I can get you that same death benefit for,
right.
For $70 a month. Sign right here, right? We don't just jump to the end. That's right. That's an easy way to get yourself talked out of a sale.
Yeah, I mean, on an average, a sale, good call on an average for life insurance, I'd say it would be about 45 minutes, 45 minutes to about an hour and 15 minutes, and that includes, introducing yourself, collecting their information, the demographics. That includes educating them. That includes fact finding. That's important. That's your bread and butter of the call, is the fact finding section or phase of the call. It's obtaining as much emotional value as you can. So when you get to the end of the call, you're talking about quote and close, right? You're just tying in those pain points on why this is important to them. So all those phases of the call, it should take about a solid 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes to be able to go through all that whole process, collect banking info, do underwriting, put in the application, and and then establishing a follow-up call with them after that. So a good call, I would say, would be about 45 minutes to about an hour and 15 minutes. And we literally dive into every phase of the call, just more so to make them comfortable, to speak with us, right? Because again, they don't know who we are when we're on the phone with them, right? So the big thing here is, number one, have them earn your trust, right? And number two, be able to collect as much as emotional data, right? For lack of better words, right? Reasons on why this is important to them. Have they experienced any deaths in the family? What did they go through when they had that death in the family? How were they able to obtain finances to cover the final expenses of the death of the family? Did anyone have to fly, from out of town? What was that like? Yes, it's stressful to lose a member in the family, but what was that stress like when you had to find out you had to pay X amount of dollars for final expenses and stuff? So these are just all questions that we really dive into it and really try to pull that emotional value so we can tie it back into the close.
How long does it take to fill out a life insurance application from start to finish? If you had to just get there was the most compliant, customer, and you're just saying, okay, what's your name, address, social security number? How long do you think that would take you?
The application itself, I would say probably about good 11 to 15 minutes just in the application.
Yeah, if that, probably. I bet you if everything was going smooth, I bet you can get through one in 5 to 10 minutes. Easy, right?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, Kurt, it's happened. I'm not going to say it hasn't happened. We've had those.
But what I was getting at on that side of things is it doesn't take the long part is not the application.
No, not at all.
No. And that's not the sale, right? The sale all comes before the application. And sure, like you were saying, I'm sure there's been some very quick sales. But when I would see that from an agent on the phone and, anything, Medicare, life, doesn't matter. If I see an agent with a super fast close, they're in and out in 20 minutes, my antennas go up. That's a red flag. I am not sure if they might have got the sale today, but did they get the sale a month from now when that policy went effective? And then, is that policy going to be on the books in a year from now? And I doubt it. If you don't do the proper processes, you're not asking those questions. You're not, we talk about an emotional sale. It's not that you want to be emotional and, scare the person, but it's for them to have that reason of why they're making the sale, why they're making the buy. And for them to remember that down the road, that this is an important thing. I'm not just doing it for, because I saw an ad on Google or something like that. You really got to kind of nail that in and deal with that. I think that is also a big difference between a life policy and a Medicare policy. Your life policies don't get used until the first time they get used, in most cases, right? And that's going to be the last time it gets used. Whereas with a Medicare policy, they turn 65, they got their Medicare, now they're going and they're getting their welcome to Medicare physical, they're going to the doctor, seeing the cardiologist, all that jazz. Where a life policy, you're not using it except in some rare situations where you've got, living benefits, or you've got some, a terminal illness and you can access that death benefit early. You're not using it while you're alive. That's really a benefit for your family. And so as the agent, in order to really lock that into place, because here's the last thing you want to do as an agent, for two reasons. Last thing you want to do as an agent is have somebody buy a policy and only keep it for a couple months. Because there's two things that are going to happen to you as the agent. You're going to get a chargeback and you're not going to make any money on that policy. And that's not what we're here for, right? We're here to make a living, but we're also here to provide a service to a client, because what happens when they cancel their policy after 3 months? Well, they lost 50 times 3 or 80 times 3. They got no benefit from that sale. And so really you're hurting not just yourself, but you're hurting your client. They wasted some money. You didn't make any money, and it's no good, right? No good all around. So you got to really lock that in.
When that's a good point. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
no, go
good
on.
point. Yeah, that's exactly it. The application piece is this part, is this much of the call, right? The majority of the call is diving in, like we've mentioned, right? Is getting those pain points and seeing why this is important to them. And is really getting that emotional value. I really stress that, because in fact finding, that's going to be the bread and butter of your call. Even in the education piece, talking about term policy versus a whole life policy, right? That's very important. You have to dive in and really make sure that the customer understands the difference in between both, right? Once the customer has that understanding, then you move on to the next phase of the call. So yeah, I would agree that the application piece is like this part, and that's not really the win. The win is the journey. Right. The fun part is the journey. It's not the destination. And so therefore, like once we get into the application, great. But it's like we won that customer over. We know that it's not going to be a chargeback. This is going to stick. You're going to have a higher stick rate, being that you spent more time on the phone with the customer. So I definitely agree with what you're saying. And that's exactly right. Is what you're saying is the more time you spend with the customer, the higher the chance that this policy is going to stick, and will stay with you for a very, very long time.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we talk about at EIP all the time, I hear it in different management meetings and things, is for agents, what is your why? Why are you doing this? What's the reason you come into work? What's the reason you bust your butt and do all of this? Get hung up on a whole bunch of times. What is that why? I think it's also important to find that what is that why for your clients as well. And, we need to know why we're doing it. Are we doing it for the right reasons? I hope everybody that's, in this field is. But then our job isn't necessarily to make a sale to a client. It's to help them find the whys. Why did you buy your Medicare supplement policy? Why did you buy your Medicare Advantage policy? Why did you buy that hospital indemnity or that life policy? And this is one of the things that I've had, when I first got into the business, where I got, I would get a cancellation or something along those lines, and I'd walk out and be like, man, I'd find out about it. I'm like, how did that person cancel? I have no idea. Thought everything was good there. And then, I'd end up, following up with the person. Maybe it was a cancellation of a life policy. Say, hey, I hear you, see that you've terminated your policy. Can I ask you, what was it about that? And they would say, oh, I was talking to my daughter and she didn't think I needed it or whatnot. And what I've realized over time was that was my failure. I didn't get them to understand their why enough, right? They didn't understand it enough. And then because they didn't understand enough, they couldn't explain it to their daughter, to their cousin, whoever it might be, their neighbor. I've had it all sorts of different things on why that person ended up, terminating the policy. And it was because I didn't find that why. And so taking the time to dig in is really where you can kind of enforce those whys. Do we do anything where we have people write anything down or anything like that so that they remember their whys or anything?
So we actually do, we actually go through a series of questions. So we have like a list of questions that we can ask, the customer to pretty much ask them why this is important to them. We have them pull out a pen and paper a lot of times. And mind you, we're on a screen share the majority of the time. So these conversations are kind of like how you and I are speaking. Now, there are moments where the agent will ask the, customer to have a pen and paper to jot down these important points that we're talking about, especially when we're talking about, educating them on term and whole life, right? These are things that we want them. There are certain points that we want them to write down. Also when we go into quote and close. So yeah, to answer your question, we do have, the customer, have a pen and paper with them so they can write notes down and kind of just a few reasons. Number one, write down our information despite, us sending it to them via email, but write down our information, writing down the importance of why they want this or they need to get this. Also the plan benefit amount, the cost of the plan, and any type of, follow-up dates, right? Now, all this, we send it to them via email, but when they write it down, it almost sticks, if that makes any sense. And with
I think I prefer to write things down.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot of times I feel like it's almost like I'm writing it in my brain.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also we get a bunch of emails every day. I'm sure you do.
Right.
I've got too many emails coming in sometimes. And so having that little hard copy might be good.
Yeah.
Now,
and we tell them to save it in a folder. Well, when I was with Medicare, and I'm sure they still do this, they have the customer write down the information. And usually what we tell them, we'd say, hey, make sure you put it on your refrigerator, put a magnet on it with your refrigerator. You know who your Medicare agent is. Or if you have any Medicare questions, you can contact them, right? Things like that. Make sure you have a Medicare folder. Put these notes in your Medicare folder. If you have any questions regarding your Medicare, reference that. So we do the same thing with life, right? If you have this information, put it on your refrigerator. If you have any questions regarding your life, that's the information you access. So get a folder out. Make sure you label it life. Everything we spoke about, make sure you put it in that life folder. If you have any questions, go ahead and, reference that. And also one more thing I wanted to say is with the demographic that we deal with as well, a lot of things that we do is technology based, right? Everything's emails, authorization code, text, we need a signature here and there. Sometimes people aren't used to that yet, right? We're evolving, so we're in a transition period. So with that specific demographic, sometimes they're okay with that. They actually rather do that, write things down so they have it available to them. So
I agree. And if you've only ever been in sales over the phone, and haven't been in a house making insurance sales, I got in this business in 2010. I was going out door to door, old fashioned way. And I know there's still plenty of people that do that, but a lot of people we talk to, it's over the phone sales. But if you haven't been in a house, then you haven't seen the magnet on the refrigerator of their insurance guy, or the file that they pull out and it's from every year since they turned 65. I had a guy who his Medicare card was older than I was, and he had more papers than I knew what to do with. It was crazy. Those things actually matter and actually turn into referrals, because then you're not just the fly by night guy that sold them a policy over the phone. You're not trying to hide anything. You're trying, you are the advisor, somebody that they can trust, and get that referral where they talk to their friend at bunco night, or they were playing bridge or something like that, and they got this life insurance policy. And there's two opportunities that we have there. We've got an opportunity to lose a policy, right? Because they don't know their why. But if you've done your job well enough and they know their why, then you have an opportunity to get a referral as well. And so it all goes down to making a good sale. Nothing that we do in this business is trying to get one over on a client. If that's your attitude in this, then you should stop. Find something else. You're not going to be in it for the long haul, because you have to have, the client's best interest at heart. Yes, this is how we make money, is by making sales. We only make money if the client has the policy, uses the policy, it stays on the books. And then you get those referrals. Now, at the beginning of this call, we were talking about ancillary products on the Medicare side of things, and how it kind of molds well with the sale, right, of a Medicare policy. And okay, we've got a gap in our Advantage plan because there's those, a $275 per day copayment for the first 6 days in the hospital. Let's fill that gap with a HIP policy. Now, how do we are we doing that on the life side of things? Do we have other opportunities where we're following up and maybe making those ancillary product sales? Because it's not like they don't need them.
Right. Yeah, no. So we definitely are. So now we've seen that it makes sense, right, to pitch the more critical illness, if anything, on the life side. Those are the ancillaries that kind of make more sense, specific, and that kind of work hand in hand with our life policies, especially if someone's passing underwriting. One of the first things we do in the call, which is almost like a pre-qualifier, to say the least. One of the first things we do is we ask them if in the 2 to 5 years, we ask the customer in the last 2 to 5 years, have you been diagnosed, prescribed medications for, had any major surgeries for, and then we have a list of things. So we'll start with like cancer, heart attack, stroke, arthritis, right? And we'll go through a list of things. Now, at that point, we're doing our pre-qualifier to determine if they would qualify for a life policy. But in hand with that, right, we also ask them, do you have any family history of, cancer, heart attack, stroke, right, things like that? Because now what we're doing is we're seeding in the call, right, we're finding out if due to any of these family histories of, cancer, heart attack, and stroke, if they do have that, we can tie that in at the end of the call when we pitch the ancillary, right? Another thing is with these ancillaries, there is underwriting required with like cancer, heart attack, and stroke, minus one specific carrier. But most carriers, you have to do underwriting for these critical illness plans. So also when we do that pre-qualifier, it indicates to us if they would qualify for any of these critical illness ancillaries. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I mean, you're qualifying on the life side, but also we've got more information on the ancillary side too.
Right. Checking off the boxes for the ancillaries as well. And then the same now with accident is guaranteed issue. Okay. So accident is almost the only real big thing that we have to worry about accident is to make sure that a customer is not on Medicaid because we don't want to sacrifice, or we don't want to compromise that benefit for them. If they're a U.S. citizen and if they're within the age limit, right? Really, those are just like the common things that we look for with accident policies. But like I said, when it comes to ancillaries, it's really those critical illness plans and the accident policies that work hand in hand with life. And then when we do our pre-qualifier, that's kind of how we start seeding in whether they would be a candidate for a critical illness policy.
And now are we making a critical illness policy sale at the time of the life sale, or are we maybe following up and doing that in different sales?
Good question. Yeah. So ideally, we handle the core first. And what I mean by that is we handle the life insurance policy first. Okay. We do have the opportunity to pitch the ancillary if we pitch the core first. So if we pitch the core, they're not interested, we can pivot to an ancillary product. All right. If we pitch the core, they are interested, we can still pitch the ancillary product. If they say, hey, I want to think about the ancillary product, not a problem. We'll talk about that when we follow back up with you in about 14 days. Let's go ahead and close this off first, this life policy first, and then we'll talk about the ancillary product later when we follow up with you.
Keeping the main thing when it comes down to it. Let's keep let's take care of the core policy. That's why the person reached out to us in the first place. And now let's take care of that. And then we can talk about the other things that maybe they didn't know about that they still need. And I think this is an important thing for most agents and frankly, agency owners. I've talked to a lot of agency owners out there, and they are very high volume, sell a lot of Medicare, either Advantage or supplements, and don't really touch any ancillary policies. And I think that some of that comes down to they almost keep the main thing, and then they forget that the client still needs all those other things. And we always need to remember, like, yes, there's a bunch of policies that we can sell a client, but you're not just selling a policy to sell a policy. There's a need there. And once you've actually sold some of these policies, once you've had a client use their hospital indemnity plan and they're on a fixed income and they don't have very much savings, and instead of having a $1,500 hospital, copayment that they were going to have to make because they stayed in the hospital for 5 days with a $300 a day copayment, well, now they've got that hospital indemnity plan to, either cushion some of that or take care of all of that. They call you up, you've got a customer for life. They love you for it. Same thing on the, on the critical illness side. They, somebody has something go on. It's not a fun call a lot of times, that when they call you in that situation and they say, hey, Kurt, I just found out I've been diagnosed with cancer. I just want to know how this works with my policy. Don't worry, your Medicare supplement policy is going to take care of everything. We go through that whole, compliant conversation with them, but then also remind them, hey, by the way, you've got that $5,000, that $10,000 cancer policy. Let's go through the process, help you get the claim filed, and so that you can utilize that benefit. And like I said, now you've got a client for life on that side of things. And so following up, doing those ancillary sales on both Medicare and on life side is valuable for your clients. It's also valuable for the business's bottom line.
Right. A lot of clients really don't know about it either. They're not educated on it. So, when we touch on it after we sell the core, right, we don't push it, right, per se. We mention it, we educate them, because it is in our scripting on the 14-day follow-up, right? On the 14-day follow-up, we follow up with them to make sure that they receive their packet, right? Maybe answer any additional questions they may have, any concerns, any doubts, right? Whatever it is that it may be. Then the next phase of that call is referrals, right? Then we ask for the referrals. And then the next phase of that call is we talk about ancillaries, right? So there's a lot of opportunity with pitching the ancillaries where, if you touch on it on the first initial call and they don't bite on that, or they don't find the need for it, cool, not a problem. You have a second opportunity to do it on the referral follow-up. Right. But also, again, kind of goes hand in hand when we do our pre-qualifier. We do what we call that the 2 to 5, where in the last 2 to 5 years, have you been diagnosed with X, Y, and Z? Based off those answers, at the end of the call, once you solidify the core policy, right, you can tie that back in. Oh, you remember when we spoke about your mom having cancer, or your dad, passing away with a heart attack, right? What did that look like for you, right? With this cancer policy, you can get a $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 benefit, whatever the case may be. And at that point, if they bite, great, right? We can move forward with the policy. But if not, okay, no pressure, right? When we follow up back, in 14 days, then we'll then readdress it and see if it's something that you're interested in. But of course, you never want to leave any stone unturned, right? You want to be able to take advantage of every opportunity on both sides, right? On the customer side, right? Bring value if there is value there, if it's going to be important to them. And then on our side as well, right? If it's an opportunity for us to provide to the customer and we can help them, then, of course, we have to do that as well. It's our due diligence as an agent.
It's true. And you talked about something a little bit earlier about a lot of times people aren't educated on it. And I want to give an example that I think most insurance agents out there are probably familiar with, but, brush it off a little bit. We know all about our cancer, heart attack, and, we know about the hospital indemnity, dental, all of these policies that we sell on a daily basis. We're very familiar with them. We have to be in order to sell these policies. But our clients don't know about that in most cases, just like I would, be willing to guess, unless you're an agent or agency out there that also does property and casualty or P&C auto insurance, you're probably not familiar with all the different riders that go on your car insurance policy. You're not familiar with how gap insurance works when you go to buy a car at a dealership, what it even means. Do I need it? I've already got car insurance. Why do I need gap insurance? Is this an extra policy? When do I buy that? When don't I buy it? I know the terms. I know kind of how they work, but before I make that decision, I really need to kind of look into, what type of policy I need. And I don't know that off the top of my head. It's not my specialty. And your clients are the same way. They just don't know about these different options, these different policies that are out there that frankly can help them out. We're talking about life insurance. Well, why would somebody need a cancer policy if they've got life insurance? Well, a lot of times we don't pass away right away when we get cancer. It's not something that happens overnight. I actually know a younger woman who has been fighting cancer for the last year and a half and is pretty aggressive. You know what? A $40,000 or $50,000 cancer policy for somebody that's, in their early 40s isn't all that expensive. And I bet you would have helped to have that extra $40,000, $50,000 that they could have used tax-free. It's just a check. You can use it for whatever you want. That's kind of one of the things that I would always talk about. If you want to use it for a cruise, then fine. You can do that. It doesn't have to go to cancer, research or your medicine or anything. But those bills do happen. And yes, the life insurance might be able to come in and assist in some of that stuff, but now we're taking away from, the purpose that somebody bought that life insurance. And to be able to insure them pretty cheaply on the cancer side of things is huge. On the heart attack, stroke side of things, not everybody dies from a heart attack or a stroke. Sometimes you're disabled and you need changes in your house. You need to put in a ramp or something. You need some handrails because not as stable on your feet anymore. And that all costs money. And, sure, some of us agents or agency owners out there, we've got money in the bank. We're all saved up and good to go. A lot of us aren't necessarily in that way, but that's our clients too. And so to have that extra bit, and to be able to insure it for $20 a month, just under $1 a day, I can go through the different sales pitches. We all should know those pitches, but it's true. And the reason that we use those is because they're true and they do work. And so to be able to have those pitches, I think is huge. I think the way that EIP started their life division was a smart way, not just because I work for EIP, but I think if you're an agency out there that's in the business, you're selling Medicare, you're seeing, you've got great success in the Medicare business, have a bunch of volume, and you're not selling ancillaries, you're missing out. And if you haven't looked at opening up a life division and kind of what that takes, I think if you're going to, our little blueprint is a good way to do it. Don't reinvent the wheel completely. See how you can convert some of your Medicare tactics and techniques over to a life division. We've done it. We know how to help people with that. We're helping people with that every day here at EIP. And so, Wiley, I really do appreciate you coming on and talking about the life thing, the life division and everything you've been a part of starting that off. Before I let you go, though, I do have one last little question here. Is there anything in the insurance, in our, let's focus on our Medicare and our final expense space, anything that, you just don't think gets talked about enough, maybe something that agents you see doing all the time that is a simple mistake or a simple error or just like a big overall conversation that you think people aren't having enough that, maybe we didn't talk about so far?
I think the biggest thing that really separates us apart from a lot of different agencies, I think it's, yes, the process that we have in place absolutely is a huge factor. But I also feel that the energy that we bring into the building, into the work environment plays a huge role, right? Because, think about it, as an agent, you come in and, granted, our objective here is to help these clients as much as we can, right? So we should naturally have a passion for this, right? That's why we're here. It's for our whys, right? But along with that, it's just normal, for things to just become like redundant, right? Kind of doing the same thing over and over. I think what separates us from, from other companies is the fact that every day we bring in this energy, right? Energy is key, right? When our agents are smiling, they're smiling through the phone and the customers receive that same energy. We have a motto here, that goes, energy creates emotions and emotions create enrollments, right? And so we kind of stick to that because if we're happy as agents and we enjoy working with one another and coming into work, looking forward to coming into work, and, really just having a really good environment of where we're at day to day, that naturally will resonate through the phone. So if it's one key thing that I could say or one key advice that I would give maybe other agencies or other brokerages, right, that are in a familiar work environment like us, I would say is making sure that we're constantly motivating the agents, bringing that encouragement, bringing that energy that, hey, it doesn't matter what happens today, whether you get the deal, whether you don't get the deal, we're here to support you. And just kind of being very hands-on and just more so like being a very, very big supportive factor to the agent. Because naturally, if the agent is happy, then when they get on the phone with the client, whether it's in person or whether it's over the phone, they're naturally going to give them that comfort, that confidence, and, just that positive energy that, hey, it's okay to talk to me. It's okay. I'm here to help you out. So if it's one key thing that I'd say that has really helped us here in the life department specifically and in Medicare as well, it's just bringing that energy, bringing that motivation, and raising that morale. here in the company with your agents, amongst your agents. So
I think that's perfect. I don't think I could have said it better. That is a great point. We didn't talk about it at all, and it is absolutely vital to any sort of sales organization, is having that upbeat energy and being excited to do what we do.
that's right.
And so that was awesome. Thank you very much, Wiley.
No problem. Have a good one.